Hi, and welcome to Unplanned, a show about cities and how they work. I'm Sam, your host. Remember to hit the subscribe button for lots more interesting conversations to come. If you're here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I am with somebody you know very well, even if you only know him by his stores. And that person is Steven Darwin, the proprietor and the founder, I believe, of Darwin's.
No, you cannot. I am not the sole founder. My wife would be very upset if you said that I was the founder of Darwin's without giving her due credit.
Excellent. Let's correct it right now.
My wife, Isabel Darwin, yes.
Okay, excellent. But for those of you in Cambridge, you know Steven and Isabel, and you know Darwin's, and you've probably been here a million times, and the food is great, and the coffee's great, and we're here talking with Steven. Steven, welcome to Unplanned.
Thank you, Sam. How are you?
Great. Great to see you. I know you got a million things going on, as I'm sure you always do.
Always. There's always something going on, yeah.
So I thought today we would just talk about, as you know, and as I just mentioned, Unplanned is the show about cities and how they work. And one of the things that makes up a city, unquestionably, are storefronts and retail establishments and food establishments specifically, which is kind of the space you're in. Why don't we start by just having you tell us what is it you do? What is it you and your wife do? What is Darwin's as a place?
Oh, wow. Darwin's, when we first started it, it was, well, it was a way to make a living. It was a place to create community. It actually took over as a place of sort of community faster than we expected. We, within a few months of opening our first store on Mount Auburn Street,
which is where we are
right now. Yeah, we had this impression that neighbors were literally meeting each other for the first time while bumping into each other at our store. And then I'll never forget when a local real estate agent, this was 28 years ago now, mind you.
Right.
She brought in the Boston Globe realty section because there wasn't, this wasn't online at that point. It was the Boston Globe Sunday Globe was 3 inches thick and 1 inch thick of real estate listings. And she said, Steve, you've made it when a house on Brattle Street is being advertised as a 5-minute walk away from Darwin's Limited. And Isabel and I just took that to heart. I mean, it was just, people were talking about this store 28 years ago in a way that it united the neighborhood. Your proximity to the store was a marketable asset when selling a house. Just things like that. So community has always been this huge part of Darwin's. Yes, the food, yes, the coffee, but how do we create space where people want to come and meet one another and interact?
Yeah. And what was first help us do the math. 2021 minus 28 equals, what was the year that you guys actually started? Sorry to do that to you.
Wow,
I know it's hard.
What is that, 93? Yeah, right?
Is that right? Okay, we'll check it and confirm it. 1993.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds about right. April of 93, I believe, yeah.
And you found this storefront, I assume it was vacant. I mean, we'll do a little bit of local history here. What was the
It used to be called the Mount Auburn Market, and it was just that the other side of the room over there. The cafe part here didn't exist. It was just the little market room over there. And Isabel and I used to live down by the Mount Auburn Hospital in what was a rent-controlled apartment back in the day. And we were always so frustrated that this market that was down the road never had anything in it that we could use. It was really run down. It was really bad. And we just decided that my wife Isabel, literally one morning she was like, "That's where we belong. Go make it happen." And I talked with a realtor, and we worked it out.
Did you have a background in food, coffee? I'm trying to remember 1993, the era of the cappuccino, I suppose, had started already.
Just barely. I worked for a business behind the new Charles Hotel, because the Charles Hotel was new at the time. There was a restaurant, deli, and bar back there called Janino's, and I was the general manager of that organization. And that was my first sort of serious job out of college.
You got the space, you opened up, and it sounds like from the day go, it was a place to go. It was a place to...
It was out of control too fast right from the start. And the neighborhood just vibed with all of that. I think what they really vibed with was a couple of 27-year-old kids coming in and painting a ceiling bright red and just doing something that was something that nobody had ever seen before. You know, Amazon... A business like Amazon doesn't really affect a business like this per se. The idea that were customers annoyed all the time because somebody's sitting around clogging up a table, using their laptop. Yeah, sure, and that's a real issue. But before people were reading newspapers online and doing homework, people were sitting in a chair reading a newspaper, clogging up a chair. And I think there's just a sort of...
So humans haven't changed that much.
I just think there's a cultural... lack of understanding from the older generation to the younger generation of how space is used. But this is a dilemma for every cafe owner, is how to discreetly encourage people, like if you're going to be here, you need to be buying something, or you do need to move on to free up the space for somebody else that does wish to buy something, because we gotta pay the rent, you know? I have honestly had great experiences working for the city of Cambridge. I know a lot of the people obviously down at licensing and inspectional, just because I've been doing this for so long at this point. And I have found them always to be really fair and really nice. The biggest problems I've had have just come out of my naivety or stupidity, whatever you want to say. Like 28 years ago when we bought this business that was the Mount Auburn Market, you know, it was just a business transfer. We weren't going through zoning or anything because we weren't changing anything. We were just taking over somebody's business and doing it. When I said to the landlady I wanted, that I was willing to take over this space over here, and we were going to do some construction, well, then it changed everything. Now, but back then, 28 years ago, I could show up at inspectional services with a pencil sketch of what I wanted to do, and they would look at me and look at, I was like this 27-year-old kid, and they'd be like, go do what you want. We'll come check it out later. So I started doing things, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, where's your handicapped accessible entrance? Where's this? Where's that? And I'm like, I didn't know I needed to do any of this stuff. I had two ladies that came in and saw the price of our grapefruit it was something ridiculous. Like our grapefruit was 25 cents, but they could go and get the grapefruits at a market that used to be called Sages in Harvard Square. They could get a grapefruit there for 20 cents. And they made this big uproar. These two ladies must have been in their early 80s. They literally said out loud in front of everybody, we can get our grapefruits for 5 cents less at Sages. We're going to Sages. They high-fived each other and said, power to the people, and walked out. Yes, so things have changed a lot in 28 years. I don't know what advice I would give to anybody. I've had some friends that that were thinking they wanted to get in the cafe business, but when they see what I go through all the time, they've decided not to do that. Honestly, I think that I deal with the business and the stress now the way I do because I've been brought up in it my entire life. I honestly can't imagine what it'd be like to walk cold turkey into everything, like to run to run a brick and mortar food operation right now from scratch. I really think it would be a lot. It's a lot.
All right, let's jump to COVID. So we've all been through this COVID year. We're about 1 year into COVID. What was it like from your perspective? You have a going business. It requires people to come in the front door, order a cup of coffee, sit for a bit, chat with their neighbor. What was your experience like?
My experience was just sheer terror as it was happening and unfolding. It was hard. You know, we just watched everything just like vaporize. It was a huge conversation with the managers at the stores, like, what do you feel is right? Because nobody knew. I didn't know what the right decision was to make. A lot of my peer group in the cafe business absolutely shut down. I think because of this store in particular, because we were always like this community market, it was the idea that, well, maybe we should stay open because we need to provide services for the community, which then led to a couple of the other stores saying, you know what, we could stay open too. And then for the store in Putnam Ave, it wasn't right for them because most of the staff took public transportation and the kids weren't feeling safe doing that. And Isabel and I, you know, as business owners, we didn't want anybody feeling unsafe. We didn't want anybody doing anything that they didn't want to do. And it ran the gamut, you know, it was that, and I would come to work and a lot of the staff would be like, thank you, Steve, for keeping the store open, but, you know, we really want our jobs. Now, but this was before anybody knew that the federal government was gonna, give unemployment benefits to the level that they did. And, you know, you would know this as well as I do. What we just saw happen during this pandemic in terms of the federal government pitching in money and supporting the stock market, even all of these things. I've never seen that in my lifetime.
Right.
In my lifetime.
And what's about to happen may go way beyond
yeah,
that.
And you know, my experience was, in my lifetime, my experience was something like this was happening. It's everybody fend for themselves. Like there's like if you lose it, you're going to lose it. There's just going to be dead businesses down the street. I've never seen anything like this. So it's been a stressful year in so much that as we were pivoting, trying to figure that out, Isabel and I discussing how much of our retirement savings are we willing to keep going to maybe try to keep things viable, and then watching the sales going down day after day after day until it finally hit this like bottom plateau. And it's taught us a lot. It's COVID has taught Isabel and I a lot about our own business and about who we are as people. And we're fortunate because our daughter's out of college now. Our financial needs aren't what they once were. We're definitely in a phase of life right now where quality of life is more important to us. And I'm going to say that what I'm about to say, I've talked to other people that are running businesses, and this is not an uncommon conversation. I find it hard to believe the Darwins will ever go back to being open from 6:30 in the morning till 8 at night.
What is that? Tell me more.
The reason being that it's stressful because every day that we're open, we have to have 2 shifts of workers every day. And then the general manager of the store is supervising all these people coming and going and everything else. And everybody that works for us right now is so much happier just working that one shift during the day. They open up together, they walk out the door together. Everybody knows what work everybody has done.
It's interesting you say that you've been having these conversations both internally and with other people, because one of the episodes of Unplanned that we did looked at community engagement for urban planners. So planners always bring groups of people together to talk about their communities and what they want to see. And one of the planners who was talking to Unplanned said, one of the things that we've taken away as planners from this year of experience is that we're slightly different people than we were a year ago. And no matter how many vaccines we have or kind of go back, we're different. The world might go back to where it was a year ago, but we as people are different. And we'll never really lose that. And that is very interesting to hear you say something sort of similar to that, is that, this experience it's not just that it's taught us something, it's changed us in a way.
I couldn't agree more. And there's I think one of the biggest things over the last 5 or 6 months in terms of the changes of Darwin's is everybody, pivoting to this online ordering. I have to say, it almost kind of crushed me in a little way, because we were so used to customers coming in the door to have that personal experience, that interaction, to order something. And now, a lot of the time the customer just comes in the door, looks at the name tag on the bag, great, thank you, I'm out. And I feel like something's lost there. On the other hand, maybe something's gained in efficiency.
It's interesting because that might solve a business problem for you, but that community side of it just disappears. It turns a 10-minute interaction into a 30-second.
But the community aspect is why Isabel and I have stuck with this business.
Right.
We are not wanting to run Darwin's just so we can make a sandwich and sell a cup of coffee. That's not what we're trying to do. We look at each one of our spaces as our own personal, three-dimensional interactive art project. You're supposed to walk into a Darwin's and go, oh, that's cool. Oh, maybe I'd like to hang out here for a little bit. Take a chunk out of my day, slow everything else down.
On that, let's pause and just notice this, which is wonderful. It sounded like you had an artist, somebody who came in.
She's one of our wonderful employees. Her name is Tess Bushy, and we were repainting the cafe here, and she said, "Hey, I want to put a mural on that space," and I was like, "Yeah, go for it." And then she said, "Hey, well, don't you want to see what I'm gonna do?" And I'm like, "Nah, not really. Just surprise me."
What's your recommendation, request, advice, insight, fill in the blank, to cities and towns, to urban planners, to other small businesses, to retail establishments, city of Cambridge and beyond?
You think you could have prepped me for this question, Sam? I mean, you could have prepped me for a lot of these questions, and I might have had a more thoughtful answer. I think one of the biggest things that I wanted somebody to do during the pandemic is that most of us that are renting a brick and mortar space, we're in what's called a triple net lease. And part of that lease agreement is that we pay the property taxes. And depending on the zoning of where you are in the city, it's not the same. Your property taxes are going to be all over the map. And in some instances, the property taxes make life very difficult. For instance, I have sympathy for the landlord. That landlord wants their rent, and I think they should have that rent. But then in some instances, you put the property taxes on top of that, and all of a sudden now the rent got astronomical. And I'll just say, for my one example, is I have my store here on 148 on Auburn Street. And then I have another store in the Scuderian Apothecary building on 1629 Cambridge Street. Vastly different property tax structures. Running my store on Cambridge Street is a much easier proposition. It's a more profitable position. And running the store here on Mount Auburn Street, because of the tax structure, the landlady here, this building is essentially taxed like it's in Harvard Square. And we don't have the foot traffic out here as a business would in Harvard Square. And I pleaded with the city over that stuff, but those decisions are made at the state level, so nobody could really do anything about it. But I think that if the state and the cities wanted to be more active about retaining good brick and mortar establishments, they might want to start looking at how property taxes are assessed on the retail stores, the retail landing of a building. If it's a multi-story building, yeah, assess the property taxes for the living space or whatever. But in this day and age where we do have, let's use Amazon as the example, wiping out so many traditional brick and mortar stores. It's like Walmart on steroids, right? It's harder and harder for people to come up with an idea of what's going to be financially viable in a retail space, and how many more, banks do we need to look at, right? That's not will drive community. And I do know from a commercial development standpoint, when a new commercial building goes up, the cities usually mandate there has to be retail along the bottom. Well, who are these developers supposed to rent all this retail to? Right? You know, as more and more stuff goes online, there's less and less need for storefronts, blah, 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 blah. I think
that's an interesting, you know, because that whole debate about that ground floor retail has been around for a while. And
well, you want it for a community
exactly.
standpoint.
But if you can't fill it, it presents, and the person who built the building has to carry the cost of it.
It has to carry the cost, but you have to make it viable. Like if we don't have as many businesses that are viable anymore because of this day on online ordering, etc. Well, then something's got to give if you want to have, you know, retail space where people can interact, right? I fear that people are just going to go back to what we were doing and maybe not learn anything. And the reality was the streets were already too congested before this started, and it's looking like it's just going to get even more congested. And we can't build our way out of this. We have to think about another way to live in a dense urban environment that's more enjoyable for everybody, that creates more like life, community, not just this idea of I got to get from here to here because I have to maximize this, you know, dollar one way or the other. And I think this is a lot of why I go back to like, no, I don't want to run my business from 6:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night anymore. My business is for breakfast and for lunch and a little coffee after lunch. And then we're done, because you know what? That's what makes my staff happy. It also, in the long run, makes me happy because my staff's happy, and everybody's much less stressed out, and hopefully I won't have the employee turnover that was just going rampant throughout this industry, you know, pre-COVID. It was ridiculous. It was literally, I said it over and over, this is just nothing but a race to the bottom. And personally, for Darwin's and for my idea of a brick and mortar establishment in a wonderful city, like I said, I've lived my whole life here. I love it. I think COVID, for me, honestly, was a blessing in disguise. And that's not to downplay so much of the hurt that so many people have gone through. But it allowed me to personally, and for my wife, to help me, because she did, hit the reset button. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How can we make this a more beautiful experience for the customer and for my staff? For people that want to make, you know, my kids are making a lot more than minimum wage here. You know, these have turned into really good jobs because customers are tipping more now. They're being more appreciative to the people behind the line, and it's a win-win. So if my staff's happy, they're projecting more happiness to the customer's happy, they're tipping more. I'm less stressed out because I'm not wondering what somebody's going to do next. You know, that's a negative for the business. You know, now we're getting positives to the business all the time because the customer appreciates what we're doing. My employees feel appreciated, and I'm watching them change, grow, and becoming confident because the business is just, it's manageable. It's easier to get your head around so we can give a better experience.
And the question then is, how do we hold on to that? You know, that what you've just described, that somebody said in talking about COVID, he had a literature, he was talking about literature, he said he thought about Dante because we've been through kind of a hell. We've also been through kind of a purgatory, we're trapped in our homes, but there's been a little bit of heaven in there as well, things we never thought we'd even imagine, and all of a sudden, you know, more time, more appreciation for what people do, the sacrifices and the risks people take to stay open, make sure we can go buy some food somewhere. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah.
Steven Darwin, Darwin's here in Cambridge. Thank you for being on Unplanned.
That's great, Sam. Nice talking with you.